All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to the COVID-19 update webinar. Just so you are aware, all attendees are muted for this presentation. We do encourage questions, and you can type your questions by clicking the Q&A box in the lower part of your webinar window. The webinar is also being recorded and should be available next week. This is the last week that this webinar link will be working for those of you who have joined us multiple times. A new registration link is going to be sent out early next week and will be the new Zoom meeting link going forward. So please look for that invite and register for it when it comes to your inbox. Thank you again for joining us today. And now I'd like to welcome Jamie Budden.
Thanks, Mitch. Feel free to go to the next slide. So as the press conference is still going, there is a lot happening today for counties in terms of COVID response and variants and things like that. And thankfully and fortunately, we have a number of guest speakers today joining us from the governor's office and the Office of Financial Management. I know you all probably have a lot of questions and things that you are eager to get started for the weekend with. So hopefully that they will be able to provide some more information and help answer some questions that you all have given a lot of the news that the governor presented earlier today. And then should time permit, we'll also do some quick roundtable updates for you all as well so that you can touch base with each other. So Mitch, go ahead and move to the next slide. So our guest speakers, we actually have 3 guest speakers for today. We have Nick Struley with the governor's office, as well as David Postman from the governor's office and Scott Merriman from Office of Financial Management. And I know Nick has been really involved with WASAC. We've been able to touch base with Nick and Scott pretty much weekly and just kind of talk through some of the issues that we're experiencing at the county level. And I know Nick has been really involved as well with the guidance. So Nick, I don't know if you are on. I see that David and Scott are on. So Mitch, if we can unmute David and if we can unmute Scott, and then Nick, if you're able to unmute yourself as well, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. So David, I see you first. So if you would like to speak first, and then perhaps Scott.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. Nick is not able to join. He is still on with the governor. He's on the call to do Q&A. If he gets it, I'm not sure how close they are to being done because I turned it off to join you here, but they should be done soon, and Nick will join. And he knows the fine details of all that was announced today if you have specific questions. But let me first just, let me give you I assume a lot of you watched or heard what the governor is saying today, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but we can answer questions for you to the best of our ability. But I saw today as a major announcement in our long path toward recovery. The original stay home, stay healthy order expires midnight Sunday, and we will have a new version coming, which is a big step forward from where we've been, and frankly follows what we had hoped would be the path when we started this whole thing, which was we were going to shut down pretty fast. And we went broad. We had a couple of stretch goals that some other states didn't do. Construction is one of those examples. Last I read, Washington State had done more than any other state, any state with more than about, I think, 25 deaths to flatten the curve. So places that were hardest hit, we're really able to make a difference. We still have a higher rate of infection on a statewide average than we would feel that we want. But things have gotten consistently better. The transmission rate, the R0 number that you hear the governor and others talk about so much, is lower than it's been. the number of cases. We're seeing hotspots in congregate living and working facilities. So there definitely are some problems that remain, but we're in much better shape. So that's allowed the governor to make some changes here. This will create what I think of as a phase 1.5, which is for those counties that aren't ready really to go to phase 2, they can resume some economic activity and some social and recreational activity. Construction, manufacturing, outdoor dining, professional and personal services. So you can get a haircut, your dog can get a haircut, and you can get your taxes done. A lot of that will be allowed. Now, none of that is automatic. We will still require counties to make application to the Department of Health. And as you know, the Department of Health has been very quick on the turnaround on those. And I'm sure they will continue to be. We also will be coming up, I think, middle of next week on the first opportunity for some counties to apply for phase 3. And Secretary Weisman is ready to take a look at those as well. Today, the governor talked a lot about masks and the L&I order on that, and the requirements on employers around those. And one of the reasons he wanted to focus on that today, while we were also talking about the opening here, is that there's a little shift in strategy here. You know, when we were in the heat of this outbreak, wearing masks probably would have helped some from the start. We didn't have the knowledge we have today on all these things. We didn't have isolation facilities and things of that sort. And it was popping up all over. We now are more focused. We know where the hot spots are, and we've built up this infrastructure. So what we're saying is this is not a return to normal. This is a transition to economic life during a pandemic. And that's why, you know, you'll be able to go to the store, but you'll know that you're not pre-pandemic. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. We need to keep doing these things. It's different things we're asking ourselves to do and our families and friends and neighbors to do, but we're asking people to wear masks. We're asking people to mind the markings on the floor at the grocery store, to stay 6 feet apart, to not travel needlessly, and all of those things. So it is a different phase in a lot of ways. I think we're going to hopefully see people being a little more encouraged about the state of the state here and getting back to normal. We will also see rising frustration in those places who aren't able to move apace with some of the other counties. And we're just doing everything we can to help those counties advance and to control their outbreaks as much as possible. With that, I think I will pause, see if either Nick has joined or Scott had anything more to do, but happy to take any questions. And I've got about 20 minutes I can stay on, and I think Nick can stay longer, and Scott, so.
Great, thank you, David, much appreciated. I do see that Nick is on, so Nick, I'll turn it over to you, and feel free to take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me. And I really don't have much more to add. I think David hit all the really salient points. You know, I think folks have, you know, we feel really good about taking this step, and counties having this flexibility and this ability to be able to submit these applications. And I think the county variance process has worked so incredibly well. You know, the idea that, you know, 26 counties at this point are in phase 2 already. And, you know, but before the end of May, I think that's just an incredible testament to how well this is working. And so we're looking forward to keeping that going and having this process continue to play out. And I think, you know, as the governor said today, in conjunction with the mask, you know, a mask announcement, that, you know, folks have a lot of ability to keep this positive momentum going, as long as we continue to be willing to do these things to protect ourselves and protect our neighbors.
Great, thanks. And before I open it up to questions, Scott, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have anything to add.
I'm not going to add anything about the variance. You all should have gotten award letters from the Commerce Department for the federal funds that are being made available, and that process is well underway to enter into the contracts with Commerce. I know that there's going to be another webinar, I think next week with Commerce. What continues to evolve, and we will all keep you informed of that, is the guidance from Treasury and the frequently asked questions continue to, I guess, get more clarification and or additional Q&A added to it. So it's fluid, but I think it's moving in the right direction. And if you all have questions, you can contact me, you can contact Commerce, and we will do our best to answer those questions and make this work as successfully as we can.
Great, thank you, Scott. We have some questions that are starting to roll in. So just a reminder for folks, if you do have questions, feel free to utilize the chat box and the Q&A box. So the first question we have is from Councilmember Stevens in San Juan County. Does the new version of Stay Home, Stay Healthy alter phase 2 guidance? And I think he's getting at the folks that are in phase 2 for the county variants now, does that guidance still ring true moving forward?
Yeah.
This is Nick. Yeah, the answer is yes.
It does not change for phase 2. You mean they continue to do what phase 2 says if you're in a county that's in phase 2 currently.
Great, thank you. Another concern or comment, concern with masks is the outdoor work environment, including dust around the masks, will get clogged. There's also an issue of heat and masks in Eastern Washington. Work conditions have these issues been discussed? So I think just employee safety and health with masks.
Nick, can you address that?
Yeah, happy to. So absolutely, we understand that masks aren't always a comfortable thing to wear, especially as we get into the summer and it starts to get warmer and warmer. The Department of Labor and Industries has taken a really thoughtful approach to the way the mask guidance is written, doing the best we can to make sure that if you're working alone or you're working in a secluded way, that perhaps that facial covering isn't necessary. But at the same time, if you're working in a situation that a facial covering is required, it really is important that you wear it. And it really is important that you do that to help slow the spread of the virus and protect those around you. So it has been discussed related to the fact that summer is coming. There are a lot of professions that COVID aside require facial coverings, and those folks are able to do that through the hot and heat through the heat of the summer. So it's been discussed, and I know it's something that Elle and I took a thoughtful approach in the way they crafted it.
Great, thanks, Nick. And perhaps we can invite someone from L&I to join us next week for this webinar. Commissioner Johnson, I think you have your hand raised. So if we could unmute you to ask your question.
Commissioner Johnson, we've unmuted you. You may have to unmute on your end. And again, that's the microphone icon in the bottom left-hand corner of your Zoom interface. Looks like you got it.
Oh, thank you. Sorry to bother you, but the issue of masks and the homeless keeps coming up, at least in our county. I'd just like you to address that, because obviously many of those individuals, and certainly other people that can't afford them all, can't afford masks. And the whole question is, how do we get those in the hands of the people that obviously may need them at times? Thank you.
So at this point, the facial covering guidelines the facial covering is required for workers in the workplace, but it's not required of the general public. It is strongly recommended that the general public, when you go into a store or you're out and about, that you wear a facial covering, but it isn't required. It's only required for workers in the workplace. And again, that has to be provided by the employer in those circumstances. I know, that there are a lot of conversations happening about how do we go about procurement of facial coverings, and how do we help more and more people have access to those. I've talked to a number of counties that are undertaking some efforts to try to increase the supply and distribute those in various ways. So I know that's happening in some areas, but at this point, it's a requirement for the workplace and provided by the employer, and then strongly encouraged for the general public.
One thing I would add is Nick, you'll notice, refers to it as face coverings. They're not necessarily masks, and there's varying degrees here. And for most people who are just out and about, a cloth covering, a bandana or a homemade mask would suffice. There are some businesses and job classifications that require a specific type of mask, all the way up to the N95s. And along those lines, there are some efforts to try to get cloth face coverings to people who can't afford to buy them. Lieutenant Governor's started an effort along those lines, and there's a few others too. And the governor is working in a bipartisan way with another Western governor, and we'll have more on that coming up soon too. So it's a good question, and we would all be helped by the more people we can get to wear some kind of covering.
Great, thanks. We do have some commissioners who weren't able to watch the press conference, and I incorrectly assumed that everybody was watching it. So perhaps, Nick, you could just provide a quick highlight of the main points that the governor covered with his press conference.
Sure, I'd be happy to try to give a quick summary. So essentially what's going to happen effective June 1st, we're going to roll into the new Safe Start Washington, the phased reopening. We're going to move Washington through the phased reopening on a county by county basis. So, we've been using this variance process for the last month, and it's worked very well. And so I think with our thinking was that we're going to continue that, and each county is going to move through the phased process on a county by county basis. They'll have the ability to apply to the Secretary of Health, and be able to attempt to move to a future phase. It allows counties more flexibility to be able to safely allow additional economic activity based on target metrics and a holistic review of their COVID-19 activity and their ability to respond. So one of the important things that that the governor talked about today is that there are a series of targets and metrics that we have published that are really important, and we're watching those on a statewide basis. We're watching those on a county by county basis. But what's most important is that we look at it on a holistic basis. We look at all of those things together. So maybe one of those metrics is close to being met but isn't quite there, but that might be made up for by overperformance in a different metric, and so it still might be safe for that county to move ahead. So the Secretary of Health will have the discretion to look at that, look at the situation, and make a decision on the county's application. For any county that remains in phase 1, that county would have the ability to apply for a modified phase 1. And that application, again, would be submitted to the Secretary of Health. And the modified phase 1 essentially pulls some of the activities that are listed in phase 2 and provide some additional restrictions for them, but would allow them to happen in a modified phase 1. So an example of that would be that in-store retail is an allowed activity in phase 2. And it is also an allowed activity in phase 1.5, or the modified phase 1. However, in phase 2, the in-store retail occupancy is limited to 30%. but in the modified phase 1, it's at 15%. So in many cases, we've taken what the guidelines are for the phase 2 activity, and in order to fit it for a modified phase 1, we've sort of added some additional restrictions to make sure that those things can happen safely. So that's kind of the 50,000-foot review of what the governor talked about. We did also touch on if a county is currently in phase 2, they'll have the ability to apply for phase 3 once they've been in phase 2 for a period of 3 weeks. So for some of the earlier counties that got their applications submitted under the first round of variants, they could be coming up on the date relatively soon where they could move to phase 3. And we also talked a little bit about how there may be some necessity if a county has a hard time once they move into phase 2 or phase 3 and they see an increase in COVID activity, that they may need to move backwards in the phases. And the county itself will have the ability to do that on their own, but the Secretary of Health will also have that ability if the county doesn't choose to take that step, but we feel like it's necessary.
Great, that is a good summary, Nick. You did a good job. I know a lot of our phase 2 variance counties are very eager to apply for phase 3, to move to phase 3. One of the challenges that they had moving to phase 2 was that the guidance wasn't out before they were approved. So they got approved and then had to wait another week or so for that guidance to come out before they could officially be in phase 2 and kind of open. Is there things in the works right now to have that phase 3 guidance out? I know June 3rd, I think, is the soonest date for people to apply that first round of counties. And I know I bet June 3rd, you're going to get some applications for that variance. So just kind of wondering what the timeline is, or the estimated date for phase 3 guidance.
So we're absolutely working to quickly get that phase 3 guidance out, so that way, once a county does become eligible, they're able to start up all those activities. So we have teams working on that right now, and definitely plan to have it published, by the time folks start to roll into phase 3.
Great, thank you.
Could I just put a little plug in here for Nick Struley? He's done a lot of that work. He's led all of that work and did a lot of himself. And I just sort of want to take the opportunity to thank him in front of you all. He's done amazing work and connecting with various businesses and industries. And some of them took a little longer, and some of that's because business and industry had a hard time coming to a consensus or agreement too. And so it's been quite the effort, and the work there is really substantive and has been shared with a lot of other states as well. And that's one of the things that's allowed us to do what we did today, is the confidence in those plans that when we do open something, it's opening in a safe way that's also in a way that the business owner can make sure it happens. So I just wanted to give Nick a thanks there.
Absolutely. Is there any more business-specific guidance coming out for phase 2? I know in phase 1, there was a lot of specificity to the guidance that was coming out. Is that going to be the intent moving forward, or will we see kind of different guidance as we move through those phases?
I think we're looking to move to a model that, I think we've managed to develop a template that has a lot of the core things largely the same regardless of industry. There's really just a lot of best practices that you need to be doing regardless of what your specific business activity is. So I think we're definitely trying to move to an approach that has just more a standard template. And if a certain business activity really does need some additional elements or some additional guidance or requirements, we could add that on top of the standard template. But I do think we're moving to a place where we try to really do standardize that and apply it sort of universally.
Great. This question might be best for Scott. The CARES funding that counties received is great, but the October 31st deadline is really challenging. And we've brought this up, WASAC has, with the Treasury and Commerce as well, that it's a really difficult deadline for us, particularly because we know that we're going to have additional expenses in November around COVID precautions and response around elections and things like that. It's more of just a comment, but I just keeping you aware that that October 31st deadline is just really challenging for us to be able to efficiently and effectively disperse that funding.
Jamie, Scott, I'm well aware of the question and the concern. We're going to continue to work on it and think about it. It was an October 31 deadline with a November 15 for a final invoice. Part of the motivation there is to make sure that all of the funds that have been sent to us by the federal government get spent by the deadline in the act, which is December. And so we know some of the jurisdictions aren't going to spend some of the money. Some of the jurisdictions may need more money. So we want to have a little bit of flexibility at the end to pivot if we need to pivot.
Great, thanks. Wouldn't be doing our job with WASAC if we didn't bring it up, so appreciate it. I do have a question that came in around OPMA, and did the governor extend the order 2028 on OPMA today?
Nick, Scott, we're waiting for the four corners of the legislature to get back to us. They have to say yes.
Great. I know that Monday and Tuesday are very big commissioner meeting days, and so a lot of anxiety around making sure that if that order gets extended, it gets extended quickly. So I think commissioners are very much in favor of continuing that extension for what it's worth.
We are aware of the deadline and the pressures. You're doing your job.
Great.
That's a compliment, not a.
A comment on, I think for the consideration for the CARES and that 31 deadline that came in, consider modification of reporting on CARES funding by October 31st with clear allocations ending December 31st. So as you all mull around that issue, I think that's an option that we're presenting to you all. And then Commissioner Trask had a comment that Will Cox signed the letter, I'm assuming around OPMA today. So that's encouraging. One corner down. All right, any other questions for Nick and for Scott? It looked like David had to jump off, but I think we have Nick and Scott for a little bit longer yet.
Jamie, this is Melanie. I have a question that maybe we sort of touched on, but I don't think I'm totally clear on it yet. And that is, we've seen now in phase 1 and phase 2, the specific guidelines coming out for specific business types, and I think people have not felt like other businesses can open until they have something like that. And of course, we get lots of questions about when can our libraries open, when can our drive-in movie theaters open, things of that nature. So I'm wondering, are we going to have that continue to roll out that way, or will we just have some kind of, for lack of a better phrase, like block opening where certain types of businesses can open? Or I guess I'm just looking for some clarity around guidance on things that haven't yet opened, on how we should expect to know that they can, if they're not specifically listed on the phase chart.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think our phase chart touches on it. That in phase 3, I think there's sort of some catch-all language that says everybody else or something, something to that effect. But I think that, you know, we're trying to work out exactly what that's going to look like. I think I touched earlier on the, you know, the template that we're developing that's just sort of generic for everybody. I think that, I think it's going to, you know, roll out something like that, but we're still trying to nail down exactly the details. I know drive-in movie theaters are important to folks, and we receive requests on that. I know we're working on a few things. Libraries, similarly, we've been working with folks in the library. In the library, I guess they're not really an industry. And I think we are going to be able to do some variation of library. You know, maybe it's curbside, maybe it's something else relatively soon. So, you know, I think we are working on some of those, so that way, you know, for folks that are in phase 2 or maybe, you know, want to go to a modified phase 1 and try to include that in it, that there would be some ability. So we're working on all of that and trying to figure out the catch-all that you mentioned.
Thanks, Nick.
A question that's come in from Commissioner Price Johnson in Island County. When do you expect planning commissions can meet? Will GMA deadlines be modified so that counties are not able to do proper public processes, virtual meetings, of course?
This is Scott. I think some of the deadlines, that's going to have to be a statutory conversation with the legislature. And we continue to have those conversations on a weekly basis with the cities, with AWC and WASAC. And we're trying to work through those. It's not lost on us.
Great, thanks. And we have an offer from the health department over in Walla Walla. They've modified the restaurant guidance for tasting rooms and wineries. And so if you'd like them to share it for you so you can see what that they've been able to do for kind of a specific niche in their county, they are happy to share that.
Great.
And a comment from Commissioner Gelder and Kitsap. Our PC has been meeting virtually, not sure about conducting a hearing, I think. Just kind of a comment, I think, on to Commissioner Price Johnson's question. All right, I have another question for you. Commissioner England. All right, we got some more coming in. A comment by Commissioner Swanek. PC hearing on it that is at all controversial would be impossible by Zoom, too many people. I could imagine that be really challenging. Another question from Commissioner McCart. Concealed weapons permits prohibit face coverings, but there seems to be a requirement for certain individuals to have face coverings. Has this been addressed, or will it be addressed? So I think this gets to today, the governor really emphasized the use of masks as a community measure that we can all be taking. So if you have any thoughts or comments on that with concealed weapon permits.
So I think, again, I just reiterate that the requirement that we put out there today is that for people in the workplace, you know, a cloth facial covering is required, and that has to be provided by the employer. But the general public, as they're going shopping or doing anything else, it's not a requirement. But it is strongly encouraged, and businesses are going to have to put signage at the entrance to their business, encouraging their customers to wear a facial covering. But again, it's not a requirement for the general public. I will say that a number of counties, Spokane County, Thurston County, King County, also I believe there was another county in central Washington, and a few others that I knew were contemplating it, were issuing public health directives requiring the general public to wear facial coverings. But at this point, the state has not done that.
Great, thanks. see here. There was a question or a comment that came through from Commissioner Shin from Asotin County that Idaho is going to kind of what phase 3 looks like for us tomorrow. So just a comment that it's great to be able to have kind of that ability for counties to be nimble as they move through those phases, especially for border communities. I know the governor has worked really closely with Oregon and California, and so I think that connection is just really important, and just expressing gratitude of, I think, having that increased flexibility for counties to move things forward.
We're really excited about it too. I think we feel really good about how this county by county approach has gone through the month of May, and I think it's going to serve us really well as we move into these next steps.
Mm-hmm. A question about any word on what requirements will be for phase 4. Fair Board is pushing for September fairs and I think fairs is on the mind for a lot of commissioners still this year.
Yeah, so I mean, that is gosh, it's just such a tough one. And it you know, a fair is without doubt a gathering, and it's a gathering of quite a few number of people. That's hard to imagine it fitting anywhere except for phase 4. And so that's you know, that's really difficult to see those sorts of things happening. That being said, I think you know, we are trying to think about and work with the Department of Agriculture and other stakeholders to find some creative ways. We know that, you know, for kids that are participating in 4-H or FFA, they've spent years and make significant investments into animals, and maybe they plan to show them this year and auction them off. Maybe that was going to be their, you know, their college tuition payment, or their you know, or their down payment for their first car. And so we're trying to find ways where maybe we can do some of that stuff virtually, recognizing how important it is for folks, you know, all across the state.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else's hand raised. And we've taken a lot of your time already, so let me turn it over to Eric for the final question and comment. Eric, if you can unmute.
There are too many unmute buttons. So thank you all very much. I appreciate Scott, Nick, and for being with us today, and certainly David as well. I guess my last question continues to be, you know, how can county legislative authorities, county commissioners, county council members be helpful and inform any decision making that the governor's office, State Department of Health, how we can inform what's happening at the local level more effectively. We appreciate the outreach. I think we just want to make sure that there's just this clear understanding that, you know, we are kind of vertically integrated in the governance of public health in Washington State and in economic recovery now. And so any input that you can give us around how do we work better together. And I think my second question, and this is probably for Scott, we still are monitoring and watching that there's up to about $240 million that could still come from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to local government, and just wondering what the latest thinking on that is.
I can take the first one, and then Scott, do you want to take the second one?
Sure.
Awesome. So I understand your question is just sort of how do we work better together? And I really think that's just it. You know, we try to have as many recurring contacts from our office with folks from counties and cities all over the state as much as we can. I know I personally talk to a number of mayors and county commissioners on as regular a basis as I can, usually weekly. And you know, what I always want to know is there something we can do from our office to help, you know, to help you with the virus, to help you with, you know, if you're having an outbreak, if you need PPE, if there's something going on that we can help with, you know, we want to work together on that. Because and the reason why I list those specific things is because if we can do really well on that side of the equation, we can move more quickly through the reopening, getting businesses back up and running again. So I know we hear quite often the desire for the business reopening side of things, and we hear you, and we're there, and we're trying to do a lot of that stuff too. But I also want to make sure that folks know and understand that we're here to help on the other side of the equation that really helps you get there. And that's helping get the COVID activity under control, and helping do that contact tracing, and helping increasing testing and that sort of stuff. So it's we're here to help. Just let us know how.
And Eric, I think the good thing is that you and your staff know all of us and have all of our phone numbers. You get a hold of us just about any time you can. And I think when something comes up, or if there's an idea, having a problem statement and a proposed solution makes it a whole lot easier to try to get to a resolution. I don't think we always have to wait till there's a problem, but if there's an idea, then put it on the table, and we're always willing to work through stuff. To the 240 million. No decisions have been made. We need to have conversations with the legislature on this. They're, between the 300 million, we had to go through a process with the legislature. The other money that's left over, there's got to be a process with them. They are starting to want to assert their appropriate role in how money gets spent, because we're talking about a substantial sum of money in the aggregate, and they're anxious and they want to be involved. And we had a call with some of them today, and we're going to be designing a process. And for everybody else's benefit, the moment they come into special session, it's their prerogative then to appropriate. And we may or may not like how they do that. So we're trying to work cooperatively with them. And of course, we will always take your input and advice.
Great, thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Scott, for joining us. Much appreciated. I know a lot of folks that were eager to hear what the governor had to say today, and I think the path forward and the flexibility that we'll have, it'll be very helpful for a lot of counties to be able to do what they can to reopen and keep moving forward. So thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. And if you'd like to hang out with us for the rest of our webinar, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Nick, Mitch, if we can go, to the next quick roundtable. Eric, you usually lead this effort. I don't know if you want to do that again and just kind of see. I've posed these questions. By no means do you need to stick to these questions, but just to kind of get the roundtable going. So Eric, if you want to call on different counties to hear some updates from them.
Jamie and Eric.
Yeah, this is Eric.
Before we start calling on people, do you have time in here for quick updates, or at the end, or if we have anything, should we do that now, or just checking, because I don't remember what the slides said?
Oh yeah, let's do the quick updates now so that we don't forget.
Thanks. I just have a couple of things, and then if I'm missing something, remind me. But first of all, I think, we've talked a lot about the OPMA order, and is that coming? Will it be extended? There's a lot of rumor right now, but honestly, it's not just the OPMA one. My understanding is there's something like 28 proclamations that need to be extended. So hopefully those are all coming soon. I don't think that they will necessarily be for a full month. We might see them for a shorter period of time, or some of them for a shorter period of time, like we did the last round or the round before that. I don't remember. And then I've noticed on some other calls that there's been a ton of questions about the rent increase freeze and evictions order. That one doesn't expire until I think the 3rd or the 4th. So there's a few more days left on that one. But it's been brought up on so many other calls that I've been on that I'm certain that the governor's office is as aware of the importance to people on that one as they are the importance on the OPMA one for us. My understanding in talking to governor's staff this morning, so always potentially changed, is that they are still working on expanding what can be done under the OPMA waiver. So when it does get extended, it will probably look the same as what you've seen it, but then they're working on amending it after it's extended is how I understand it. And I could definitely have that wrong, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was still on the table. And then I also wanted to mention, because this was just totally not on my radar, that so it may not be on yours either. We spent so much time talking about the phases for that have come from the governor that we don't, and we don't spend a ton of time talking about the court and the order from the Supreme Court. And I happened to catch a news article this morning, otherwise I wouldn't have thought about it, but the court did issue a new order yesterday. It is mostly the same as the order that they've had, but it does have a couple of things that were added, specifically that they recognize that they are essential and that conducting court business is essential. And in talking with someone from the administrative office of the courts, the changes are based on the understanding that courts will move forward in hearing matters that have been postponed. Understanding judicial discretion remains to grant continuances based on the needs of individual cases. And they originally had said, and this continues, that jury trials won't start until after July 6th. However, non-emergency civil matters and criminal matters and others, they had a June 1st date in there. So I do know that some courts, I asked for a list in case anyone had one, and over at AOC they did not, but so it's all anecdotal, but there are courts that are planning on opening up some front-facing services next week with social distancing and all those types of orders in place, but definitely you could see some increased activity in your courtroom. I've heard that one court is planning a bench trial next week and some other things like that. So just wanted it to be something that you were aware of, because like I said, I had just kind of spaced it until I saw the article this morning. And if we will, I think we've been publishing the Supreme Court orders in our, when we have them, and we'll put it in our daily email, and so you'll have it. But if you want a copy of it or anything, I can probably copy it into the chat box or something like that too, or link to it anyway. And I think, Jamie, I think that's all I had. Do you remember if there was anything else?
I don't have anything. The courts was the one that I totally forgot about, so thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with a little bit of time remaining, why don't we go ahead, if you have anything that you'd like to share for your county, go ahead and raise your hand and unmute yourself, and we will make sure you're unmuted so you can report. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself.
And again, if you're calling in over the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So my guess is that folks are really excited to get working on the next applications. All right, well, I don't have anything else to say. Eric, do you have anything else?
I don't. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Too many mute buttons. Great, thanks. No, I don't have anything to add. I just really do want to continue to thank everyone for their all the work that they're doing in their counties, moving from phase 1 to phase 2. Those of you that are preparing to move to phase 3, leading the way, cutting edge work that you're doing, the coronavirus relief funds. There's still a lot of questions around if you're getting monies to small businesses. How do we go about doing that? If you have examples, that seems to probably be one of the most pressing questions that I actually get is, are any counties doing that? Do they have application processes? What criteria are they using? Do they have forms? Any of those types of things that you've already developed, please send those to us so we can distribute those and share those. So others clearly want to plagiarize your work, which is in fact what part of this exchange of information is about. Then I guess the last thing I would say is we do have upcoming activities. Again, we've got a coronavirus relief fund where we have Tony Hansen from the Department of Commerce will be on the line with us. And I think that's next Monday from noon to 1, if I'm correct, Jamie, if I'm recalling. So please make sure you join that as we continue to work on that. We'll get probably another variance meeting up before long too. So folks can begin to talk about what they are learning about moving from phase 2 to phase 3 and phase 1 to phase 2. So a lot going on, and we continue to work closely with your affiliate departments, the county departments beneath the boards of county commissioners and county executives. So we're closely with them, and they're still continue to be very actively engaged as they are administering within this context of COVID-19 and phasing in and learning how we reopen a number of our governmental services.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And I'll just sign off and just remind everyone that this was our last invite for the month of May. So we will be sending out that new calendar invite for our weekly check-ins for the month of June. So be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, yes.
Before you say goodbye and hang up, I see that Commissioner Swanek has a question that I wanted to answer, and he says, is county government considered business under the mask rule? And I'm going to say that the answer is probably yes. Generally speaking, government is considered, subject to L&I regulations and things like that. So I haven't seen anything that would specifically exclude county government. So I would err on the side of that it probably is.
Great, thanks. And with that, we wish you all a happy weekend and be safe, and talk to you all next week. Thanks for joining.